The whole dialogue or final reader here. It's Charles Bernstein.
Okay.
Hey.
Well, very informative about labial lips. I always thought I could feel my labial lips, so that was to get some perspective on it. All right, so I am going to read from a few poems from this book, Recalculating, and there are four poems that are pervasively aphoristic, and I'm going to read a couple of those, seeing what the time is.
Girls, you might want to turn off the PRP blog.
Okay. Hey,
because I think it's delayed.
About labial lips. I always thought I. That was the second.
I think we just closed the one tab with.
Yeah, I have it on, and I mean, one thing about my work is that it really does manage to repress any anger. I'm really I've purged it entirely from my being, and it neither possesses me nor do I possess it. I'm really a creature of pure contentment and bliss, as you'll see from this work.
All right, you're coming in loud and clear now.
You can hear me? Okay.
Absolutely.
Live from the Upper West Side. The truth in pudding. Recalculating. Imagine poetry as a series of terraces, some vast, some no bigger than a pinprick, overlooking the city of language. The sound and light show begins in the dark. Sentences dart by one, forming wave after wave of the rag and bone shop of the quotidian. Events passing before our eyes like the faint glimmer of consciousness in an alcoholic stupor. Facts everywhere, but not a drop to drink. Now it is dawn, now night, now moon, now morning. It's as if the day never ends. It just keeps coming back for more. Language is an event of the world, just as for language users, the world is an event of language. Even the world is a word. Speak truth to truth. In the viscosity of process, the end never arrives. Poetry shows the ink out of the ink bottle. Don't let the proper name horse lead to the active thinking cart. A thing of beauty is annoyed forever. Poetry's social function is not to express, but rather to explore the possibilities for expression. Poetry is difficulty that stays difficult. Slivers of reason make amends. Connect the knots. Blaming others for your own failings is inevitable. Getting others to do it for you is unforgivable. Fate makes us who we are, just as we make it what it is. But the sadness overwhelms. Something there is that doesn't love a frame, that wants it laid bare. Before I made a frame, I'd ask to know what I was framing in or framing out. Two frames diverged on the common road, and I could not choose the one for the other, so stood astounded in place. For frames are what we are inside of. Two frames are better than one. Three's the thicket. Today I am worried about Professor B, who worries about whether his worrying is run-of-the-mill worry or worrisome worrying. And this worrying about his worry worries him the most, turning his worry into a kind of worrisome worry he worries about. Is the best you can do really the best you can do? Does the work frame the interpretation or the interpretation frame the work? Or is the text a work without a frame? Poetry starts in the present, but immediately takes you to its many pasts, through its many paths. What is missing from the bird's eye view is plain to see on the ground. Not incoherent, coherent by other means, by any means necessary. Not the flow of consciousness, but the flow of perception. This is from Gunnar Berling, translated by Frederick Hertzberg. It is not a thought finished and complete that seeks expression in a beautiful form. It is thought's struggle. What is in and below the thoughts. It is the things and all things behind them, the life material expressed in our perception, that we should render an aesthetic creation. A fact is a frozen state of affairs. If I had to stipulate the facts of the poem, I would say there are no facts other than the words. And the words are not facts at all, but what makes facts possible. The poem is the fact of its own making. The poet is the extension of the fact of the poem. It is what it is. It swings. Paul Anka. In the 1990s, it was common in Russia to find stores with empty shelves, but one was stripped to the bare walls. It was a shelf store. Either you have talent or we'll buy you some. Better a four-legged dog than a three-legged cat. The time is not far off, or maybe it has already come to pass, when computers will be able to write better poems than we can. So we must now add to logopoeia, phanopoeia, and melopoeia, algorithmia. Good poets make analogies. Great poets make analogies between analogies. Computers will never replace poets because computers won't take that much abuse. Better last night's salami than this morning's bologna. Poetry is to the classroom what a body is to a cemetery. Poems and innovation are the Scylla and Charybdis, or possibly Mutt and Jeff, or then again Dog and Bone, or possibly Singer and Song, or is it Doctor and Patient, or Inner and Outer, or Hook, Line, and Sinker of the politics of poetic form. It is a puzzle. I am not puzzled, but it is a puzzle. I am not puzzled, but it is very puzzling. Gertrude Stein, the mother of us all. Everybody talks about the fall of the humanities, but few make the effort to get up In other words, does the past have a future? The latter urges us beyond ourselves, hence its importance. But in a void, where do we place it? Jabez, translated Waldrop. Information is born free, but everywhere in chains. Poetry is metadata without code, free-based tagging, cascading style sheets with undefined markers. The role of teaching poetry or poetry criticism is not to overrule difficulty, as in a court of law, but to sustain it, to recognize the ways that resistance to an easy assimilation might sustain our engagement with the poem, and in the process provide an aesthetic pleasure and intellectual challenge. Yet are we scholars and teachers and artists, or academicians? The crucial distinction in our poetics is not only between presenting and representing, enacting and expressing, but also grasping and pointing. All poetics is political. All poetry is politics. All politics is poetics. What you think and $5 will get you exactly something that's worth $2.95. Schools are made to be broken. Nowhere to go but on. Yes, we have no ideology. Yes, we have no ideology today. Even the Pacific Ocean has a bottom, but you'd be hard-pressed to get there with even strokes. I may be wrong. In fact, I most certainly am wrong. Just not as wrong as you. Two rights almost always make a wrong. The absence of absence is not evidence of absence. The evidence of absence is not the absence of evidence. What is after me is also after me. I hide in my past. But the world will never weary of watching that troubled soul in its progress from darkness to darkness. Oscar Wilde, critic as artist. Don't tell me it's time to go to bed because I just woke up. As if poetry was something you give your mother-in-law when she goes deaf. Rabbi Eliza would always say, which comes first, the egg or the idea, as a way to stop a conversation she felt was coming too soon to a conclusion. One very hot afternoon, Rabbi Omar asked Rabbi Eliza to trace the origins of her favorite maxim. In a roundabout way, Rabbi Eliza began, looking up from the passage she was studying. It's related to Rabbi Yukel's so-called rule of the index finger. Don't put all your chickens in one egg, which itself is a variant of the saying attributed to Rabbi Raj, and which we chant on the first half moon of winter. One egg is not the world. On hearing this, Rabbi Omer loudly protested, noting that several centuries before Rabbi Raj, Rabbi Not Enough Sand in the Desert, Not Enough Water in the Sea, had insisted that the central question to ponder on nights without visible rainbows is, which comes first, the basket or the idea of the basket? Exactly, Rabbi Eliza said with a triumphant laugh. Without baskets or eggs, we would only have words, and without words, only mouths. Imagine poetry as a series of terraces, some vast, some no bigger than a pinprick, overlooking the city of language. The sound and light show begins in the dark. Sentences dart by one, forming wave after wave of the rag and bone shop of the quotidian. Events passing before our eyes like the faint glimmer of consciousness in an alcoholic stupor. Facts everywhere, but not a drop to drink. Now it is dawn, now night, now noon, now morning. It's as if the day never ends. It just keeps coming back for more. Language is an event of the world, just as for language users, the world is an event of language. Even the world is a word. So that's one of the four. The next, adjust this slightly. How empty is my bread pudding? For George Lakoff. The conceited poet believes the entire world to be his poem, as if you could or could not, would or would not, were or would not, as if the day ended and a new day popped out of the imagination, free of shadows, hurtling to an end of hurt beyond sorrow's gate, but could not, nor cannot, would not, nor will not, as if promise were just make-believe, and make-believe a veil behind a veil, as if the news were never told, and ignorance took the place of this incessant, miserable rain. All the signs say no passage. Still, there must be a way. Sometimes one has to shake off even the most sophisticated modes of self-presentation or self-concealment to find a sense of who you are. The arrival of the train at the station. Everyone is talking about memoir, but I just want to forget. I want poetry that helps me to forget what I never knew. Show me the baloney, and I will immerse myself in last season's mausoleums. The new is never new, but we make it new in order to keep it from becoming dead to us. The motto shouldn't be make it new, but make it live, make it live. But necrophilia surrounds us, and we take its stench as the perfume of our hip indifference to art, as something that changes in time, shifts against the time, hollers out in anguish and exasperation at the suffocating banalities that seem to call our name out loud, as if we were written by them. Poetry is too important to be left to its own devices. Show me a man with 2 feet firmly planted in the ground, and I will show you a man who cannot get his pants on. The questioning of the beautiful is always at least important as the establishment of the beautiful. Free verse is not a type of poetry, but imperative to liberate verse from constraints no longer applicable for a new time and new circumstance. The rich do not live better. The rich do live better and have the narcotic of money to help them forget how it was acquired. Be thorough, leave no turn unstoned. Digital Poetry 2003. In 1975, everybody was worried about the idea that language is code. In 2003, everybody is worried that code is language. To each his tone. The truth of the poem is neither in the representation nor the expression. Its truth dwells in what has never been and what will never be. Where possibility and impossibility collide, here the poem is forged. Sometimes a sentence is just a sentence. I've got difference. You've got same. I've got difference. You've got same. Thought is more resourceful than reality. That is why reality repudiates thought. The poem is not finished even when it is completed. The translation of poetry is never more than an extension of the practice of poetry. Traditional metrical poetry in the 21st century is like having sex through a net. Everything is relative, and if not relative, it ought to be. Sometimes a cigar is just a symbol. This is not a sentence. Morality versus aesthetics. I don't want to make poems that tell you what to think, but to show a different order of thinking. Fragments not as discontinuous, but as overlays, pleats, folds, accordal poetics in which synchronic notes melt into diachronic tones. A criticism is responsible to the degree that it is able to respond. Reforming a famous aphorism of Rimbaud, I would say I is a question, poetry an exploration, poetics a founding, foundering, refounding. Longing for nothing is often the only way to get anywhere. I'm not telling you what you can't do, but what you can do. A sigh is the sword of an angel king. Don't confuse the puzzle for the solution, the poet for the poem. Injustice in the pursuit of order is oppression. Mendacity in the pursuit of security is tyranny. What you see is never what it is, just as what you don't see may forever remain invisible to you. Make love, not unilateralism. Let's just say that one day is completely different than the next, but they still connect, and we call the patterns our lives. Or how about the storage you rent is equal to the mortgage you forego? Just because you think you can't change the world is not a reason to try any less. No man is a peninsula entire unto himself. The pen is tinier than the sword. Not yet, when then? The poetry is not in speaking to the dead, but listening to the dead. Even when it's over, it's not over. And I'll end with, as I'm doing with all of these, excerpting for the purpose of this particular reading, some of the more aphoristic Karl Kraussian moments. But I'll, boy, that feels a lot better. You know, it's very hard to read upside down. Never really tried that before, but kind of blood rushes to your head. This is called Manifest Aversions, Conceptual Conundrums, and Implausibly Deniable Winks. I love originality so much. I keep copying it. Immature poets borrow. Mature poets invest. Poetry wants to be free, or if not, available for a long-term loan. I'm the derivative product of an originality that spawns me as it spurns me. The author dies, the author's work is born. Poetry is a secret society hiding in plain sight, open to ear and mind's eye. The shock of the new for some, the invigorating tonic of the contemporary for others. Conceptual poetry is poetry pregnant with thought. The absence of conception had itself to be imagined. Poetry abhors a narrative. Which reminds me of the story of the man who reports a wife beating to a neighbor. Then stop beating her, the neighbor replies. But it's not my wife, replies the good Samaritan, becoming agitated. That's even worse, says his neighbor. No parodist goes unpunished because in these times the parodist is pilloried for the views he or she parodies. In a world of moral discourse, absent ethical engagement, only the self-righteous go unrebuked. I was born yesterday and will die tomorrow. I am not the man I was, much less the one I will be, nor imagine myself as. Just the person I almost am. A bird calls, but I hear only its song. My skin is burning, but inside I am as cold as the North Pole. My shivering is metaphysical, a kind of involuntary davening. Religion is giving religion a bad name. Nor am I an atheist. I believe in the fallible gods of thought and in my resistance to these gods. I have faith in my aversion of faith. I am an observant Jew. I look closely at the things around me as if they were foreign. You're either awake or asleep or will be. There's no depth to the depth. In the world of the imagination, impossible just means the next opportunity to get real. Existence needs essence the way a walking tour needs local color. But a hole in an argument is not the same as a point of light. Rather than an expression of love, justice is a protection against our inability to love. We are most familiar with our estrangement. It is our home ground. The absence of an accent is also an accent. Yet the dark, untouched by light, injures it all the same. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Charles, and your online avatar, Rabbi Shakov, as you were dancing around the screen. And this concludes Live Sentences, the first PRB, thanks to all of our readers. Vanessa Place Incorporated, Aaron Kunin, Ajed Zahar, Guy Bennett, Mate Nikolevich, and Maggie Smith. Sorry, Maggie Nelson. There's that strange tip of the brain again. And Charles Bernstein. Thank you very much for attending.